welcome back to another edition of the Tiger Rag Audibles Podcast. This is actually our 11th edition. It's brought to you by Pawpaw's RVs and Cars. We've got a lot to talk about today. In fact, we've got a jam-packed show. Of course, we're going to focus on the LSU Florida State game. That game didn't turn out at all like many people in Tiger Town expected, and quite honestly, it's left the result, which was 45-24 Florida State after a second half, and more in particular a fourth quarter collapse by the LSU Tigers, has left Tiger Town, and not just Tiger Town in Baton Rouge, Tiger Town all over the country, if you follow me, in a state of disarray, a little feeling disillusioned, wondering what's going to happen next and where to go. Well, we're going to break down what we think actually happened, and we're going to make a compelling case for that. And it might surprise you because it's going to center around a failure to adjust, a coaching failure that occurred late in the game, actually started in the third quarter and pushed on into the fourth quarter whenever, as you know, in the second half, Florida State came back from a 17-14 halftime deficit and outscored the Tigers 31-0 before in the last 2 minutes, Jaden Daniels hit Brian Thomas for a 75-yard touchdown to make it the final score 45-24. There's been a lot of things that have been said, a lot of bantering back and forth in the media, a lot of misunderstanding of some of the comments that Brian Kelly made in the immediate aftermath of the game, and even as he tried to explain what he meant, it actually all makes perfect sense, and Coach Kelly is not losing his mind. And I would also like to point out to you that I don't believe the season is nearly in as much of a desperation mode as a lot of fans are painting it right now, as a lot of the media is painting it right now. LSU is going to be okay. We'll explain all that. We're going to talk to Beckwith, former inside linebacker for the LSU Tigers. We're going to explore all the conversation that's been made about LSU All-American Harold Perkins and his relative lack of performance in the Florida State game. He's being used differently by LSU this year. A lot of people want to abandon him being an inside linebacker and put him back out on the edge at the jack and just say, here's the ball, go get the ball. And we're going to have some comments from Kelly about that. We're going to talk to Derry Beckwith about that specifically. We're also going to talk about the coaching failure that occurred, LSU's failure to make an adjustment, and the bearing that had on the game. That'll be very interesting. There's some other news that we're going to cover, and that's, of course, Kim Mulkey, LSU's women's basketball national championship coach in her second year this year. She won the national championship, led by Angel Reese. The Tigers stunned the nation and actually probably stunned Kim Mulkey by doing that. But she's going to be rewarded, it looks like right now, as there's been an agreement in principle that's being reported by theadvocate.com this morning that was reached between LSU and Kim Mulkey that will pay her $32 million in a multiple-year contract. And that's going to make Kim Mulkey the highest-paid coach in women's basketball. That does have to be approved by the LSU Board of Supervisors, and that's expected to take place on Friday, tomorrow morning. Additionally, today was supposed to be the day that Paul Skeens, LSU's Mr. Everything pitcher from the 7th national championship team that Jay Johnson fielded this past season, also in his second year at LSU, and Dylan Cruz. They were the number 1 and number 2 players drafted in Major League Baseball. It's the first time that's ever happened, and they're both were excelling in their trips through the minors this summer after the National Championship College World Series. But that meeting that was supposed to take place today between Skeens and Cruz is not going to happen because the Pittsburgh Pirates, who drafted Skeens, have elected to put him on the shelf, thus negating the possibility of that encounter occurring today. We've got Jay Johnson's feedback on that and more about Skeens and Cruz, their impact on the LSU brand. It comes via an interview with Major League Baseball. We'll play the entire video here today on Rag Audibles Podcast. So stick with us. We've got a lot to talk about, and we're going to try to cram it all in. We're also going to explain, like I said, what went wrong at Florida State, and should LSU fans be upset moving forward and concerned. And I'm going to tell you there's no reason for panic. So, like I said, we have a lot to talk about here today, and we're going to try to cram it all into 30 minutes or so. And it's all being done in thanks to our sponsor, which is Pawpaw's Campers and Cars. Pawpaw's Campers and Cars, you can reach them online at pawpawsrvs.com. That's pawpawsrvs.com. Or you can give them a call at 1-800-728-CAMP. That's 1-800-728-2267. That's a good RV, Pawpaw.
Hey neighbors, we're not that far from where you are. Make that short drive to Pawpaw's Campers in Picayune and see our Wildwood, Catalina, Sportsman, and Zinger trailer lines and our Rockwood and Heritage Glen fifth wheel lines. From Houma to Hammond, Biloxi to Jackson, and Mobile and Pensacola, we're not that far from where you are. Come and see us.
You're gonna love the way we deal. Pawpaw's Camper City and Picayune. You're gonna love the way we deal.
That's a good RV, Pawpaw.
Yeah, congratulations to Florida State. They played a great second half. They were the better football team tonight, and we certainly are not the football team that I thought we were, got to do a much better job, obviously, and developing our football team. We clearly were short in a lot of areas tonight, and that falls on me to get our football team to be better in most of the competitive areas that you saw tonight. Execution in the first half, the inability to convert in the red zone. Second half, didn't play with a sense of urgency. All of those fall on coaching and getting our players to recognize that and make those kinds of choices in practice. And then defensively, obviously, our inability to slow down the running game in the second half. The counter play was problematic for us. We knew they were going to run it. They added a two-back counter play, and we couldn't fit the play. And that's unacceptable from a coaching standpoint. You've got to be able to make those adjustments, and we failed to get that done.
Brian Kelly, in his post-game conference immediately following what turned into a debacle, but it wasn't a debacle at the beginning. In fact, I'm going to tell you, and you go back and look at the game tape if you want to. There's plenty of highlights all over YouTube, and I'm sure that you could even catch some on ESPN or whatever. LSU had the opportunity to be up at halftime, no less than 31-14. Kelly refers to two missed opportunities in the first half inside the red zone. Heck, there were 6 plays inside the 5-yard line. LSU gets down to the 1-yard line and fails to score on their first possession of the game. There's a number of reasons for that. There's Aaron Anderson muffing a punt. There's missed blocking assignments. There's missed tackling assignments. There's all kinds of technical reasons for it. But what Kelly's referring to at that particular moment is the lack of the LSU football team's ability to execute on the field at the level that he thought they were going to be able to execute. Still, having said that, even though it was 17-14 LSU at halftime, the third quarter was still close. The last play of the third quarter, LSU's trailing 24-17, and Jaden Daniels throws a long pass down the left sideline, underthrows Brian Thomas just a little bit. He turns, Thomas does, tries to make a catch, hits both of his hands, and he drops it. Otherwise, LSU would have been inside the 15 to start the fourth quarter, going in to tie the game. Now, the start of the fourth quarter results in an interception because Malik Neighbors slips going down the sideline, and Daniels throws it before he slips or as he slips, and that results in an interception. Florida State goes from there, and they started doing something, and this is the point where the game really changed. The tenor of the game, the physicality of the game, the momentum of the game, and it all turned because of what's called a counter. Florida State had started instituting 2 backs, and then they went back to a 12 personnel. That counter and their ability to increase their rushing ability and their success rushing the ball not only improved the physicality of the game for Florida State and broke the will of LSU's defensive line, which had harassed and put pressure on Travis most of the first half and somewhat into the third quarter, now changes. Everybody can talk all they want to, and it's true that they had an advantage, Florida State did, with their receivers on LSU's defensive backs, but there's reasons for that. There's technical reasons, technique reasons, things that occurred in on top of the physical advantage. LSU could have continued to play a tight game, could have been in the game, it could have been close until they ran into this counter situation, which they were not able to, as Kelly says, fit. They weren't able to fit the run. Let me translate that for you. They weren't able to match up and stop the counter. Okay? That resulted in Florida State rushing for nearly 100 yards in the second half after rushing for only 30 in the first half. It wore down LSU's defense, and it opened up the passing game. So the counter was the big difference in LSU's inability to adjust from it from a coaching standpoint. Now I want to see if Derry Beckwith, former LSU linebacker, agrees with that. What say you, Derry?
I do, and to a certain extent, Todd. I do believe that the whole game, LSU's defense was basically played flat, and Florida State was a more aggressive, physical team throughout the whole game. And I think when you finally got to the fourth quarter, and they did run that counter in the fourth quarter, basically out of a 12 personnel set, 2 tight ends and running back, and a lot of times they put one of the tight ends in the backfield. But anytime a team runs a counter, you have to have proper fits from your linebackers, and that's something that they didn't do. On one of the counters, I know Harold Perkins was the backside linebacker, and obviously playing RPO offenses, Todd, linebackers these days are taught to be patient, and then when you see the run committed, that's when you can commit. And on one particular play, on one counter, when the guard pulled, Harold Perkins kind of stood still too long, and he wasn't able to get over the top on the front side tackle. And he didn't realize in this position he was a spill linebacker. Spill linebacker basically means that he has help on the outside of him. Meaning, let's say Travis decided to pull the ball and run around the end. Well, he had a corner, an outside linebacker, and a safety to handle that if the quarterback did decide to pull the ball. So on one particular play, if he would have just shot over the top, got over the block, he could have limited maybe what was a 12-yard run to possibly a 3-yard run. So anytime that you run counters like that, your eyes have to be disciplined, and you have to know where your help is at. And that's one thing that I think LSU defense lacked, specifically in the linebacker position in the game, is not knowing where the help was, and obviously getting over getting off of blocks as well is something that they struggle with.
Why do you think that, as Kelly said in the post-game press conference, they were simply not able to adjust, and he took full credit or liability, if you will, as a coaching staff for not being able to adjust to that, to fit to that counter? Why do you think they couldn't make that adjustment, and how do you think that impacted the rest of the offense for Florida State going against LSU's defense?
I think that was something that kind of threw them off guard. Obviously, Florida State started running that counter in the fourth quarter. And typically you can make in-game adjustments. And I know Matt House does sits up in the booth as well. He can see that. I don't know exactly the technique that he's teaching them on how to handle counters, how to handle power runs at all. So sometimes are the players doing what the coaches are teaching them? That I have no explanation for. I just know from past experience and playing the linebacker position that usually when you have counters and you have to spill linebacker, you can go. You don't have to hesitate. You don't have to wait because you have help on the outside of you. And so for the love of me, I don't understand why they didn't make in-game adjustment to that at all. And on one of the counters, I think it was a quarterback counter, Omar Spates was a frontside linebacker. The guard pulled, and instead of him taking on the block thick, when I mean taking on the block thick, I mean taking up head on, and basically when you do that, you're restricting the lane. You're compressing the lane for the quarterback to run. He just basically ran right past the pulling guard or tackle, and it's opened up the lane for Travis to run. So I don't know if that's what they're being taught. Look, I wouldn't think that's what they're being taught, to be honest with you, because if it is, the coaches need to go back to the drawing board as well.
So how, and thank you for that explanation, but how do you think, I know Florida State added to that personnel and to that counter activity, if you will, pulling the guard and the tackle. You mentioned the RPO, but they also added play action to it. Can you explain how that would neutralize what LSU was doing in the first half specifically to sort of terrorize the Florida State offense or harass them, and they weren't able to do that after the introduction of the successful counter?
Well, play action basically what that does, that play action is a disguise. Play action is basically to get the defender's eyes in the wrong place. That's all play action is. Playing defense, especially on the second and third level, and I mean second and third level. Second level is your linebackers, third level is your secondary. Play action is to deceive your eyes. And if you don't have proper eye discipline, pre-snap, the play action will get you every time. So if I'm a linebacker and I know if I'm in zone coverage and I may be reading number three can be your slot receiver, number 3 can be the running back in the backfield. That may be your number 3. So pre-snap, you should know that's who I'm reading. And when the ball is snapped, and if you get your eyes on anything else, if you get your eyes on the play action, and you were to step up on that play action and not play discipline and not be disciplined with your eyes, obviously Travis and who else can basically, hit the ball over the top. They can get it on slant routes, which they did all game long. I know Johnny Wilson dropped a couple slant routes that were wide open. And so that's indicative that the middle of the field was wide open because what they're doing, they're sucking you in with their play action because you don't have any eye discipline. And Todd, even sometimes watching that game, even pre-snap, the way they were lined up, the middle of the field was wide open pre-snap as well. And they got them in basically mismatch opportunities, and they got out coached. They did a great job of moving Keon Coleman around and basically putting a 6'3" receiver, on a 6'2" safety. I know one time he went over Major Burns. That's all about lineups and moving your guys around and putting them in the right position to be successful. So, look, Matt House has called some good games, and some games he hasn't called so good. But also, from my standpoint, he needs to do what best fits his players on defense. And number one, it's simple. You need to play the best players. And to be honest with you, and there's no indication on the kids by no means, but he did not play the best players on defense. And 70% of the time he plays zone, but he doesn't have the type of personnel to play zone. He has the personnel to play man. And if he does that, if he mixes in a lot more man than zone, I think they can be successful, but he has to play the right personnel. And he does have the right personnel. Obviously, I know Denver Harris is in the doghouse on certain instances, but he is a man corner. LaChance Welch is a man corner. These guys who are extremely talented. If he does that, then he can be able to move Greg Brooks back to his natural position at free safety, and also maybe look at Toviano, the young freshman. Maybe move him to strong safety. Because at this point, I'm willing to take talent over experience.
So, Derry, what I'm hearing you say, just to translate for the less complex fan that might be listening to this right now, Florida State starts running the counter GT successfully. LSU's making poor reads on it, running 70% zone. The running back in the counter takes the counter step, bad read perhaps right away. Then they convert that into counter play action off the counter. So there's now multiple opportunities for a bad read out of a zone, and LSU's even pre-snap not set up correctly a lot of the time. So they basically had no chance if they weren't going to make an adjustment in game.
No, absolutely not. And sometimes when you're lined up in a zone defense, you're a little more hesitant as a linebacker and as a defender because you have a certain zone to cover, as opposed to playing man. You know, pre-snap, this is who I got. I have the tight end, I have the running back, I have the slot receiver, I have the outside receiver. It's very simple. And when you play zone, sometimes those counters can make you hesitant because you're thinking about, well, wait a minute, what if he pulls it? What if it's a play action? I have to make sure I get to my zone. As opposed to man, you're just following your man. Football is not hard. Football is very simple. It's like riding a bicycle, and they just need to simplify it and get back to just playing football. I think Brian Kelly mentioned something about Harold Perkins. Like last year, he was see ball, get ball.
Right.
Okay,
right.
And they wanted to make him more inside linebacker this year. Well, yes, that's the point of a defender. It's a see ball, get ball. When you see the ball get to and attack it, I think a lot of times coaches they overcomplicate things, they overthink things, they overanalyze things. Put the kids in the right position. Harold Perkins is going to be fine on the next level. You don't have to worry about Harold Perkins and develop him to an inside linebacker for the NFL. Because I promise you, the NFL coaches have a big ego, okay, and they know how to coach. So even if you were to put Harold Perkins back at his position for rushing the passer outside, or even using him sometimes as an inside linebacker, even though he's a Swiss Army knife, when the NFL drafts him in the first round, trust me, they will know how to use Harold Perkins. They know how to use Michael Parsons. Michael Parsons was the same type of player
Right.
At Penn State, but they found out a way to use him. So I don't want to hear anything about developing him on the next level. You're supposed to win football against LSU and let the NFL determine how they will use Harold Perkins.
So would you say, just for summary's sake, that LSU's inability to counter the counter, if you will, to adjust to the counter, was the biggest impact on the second half?
Absolutely, because what happens is once you get the run game going, and you can't stop the run, you might as well crank up the bus, Todd. Because on defense, if you cannot stop the run, crank up the bus, get the showers ready because you're going back home.
So
because now if you can't stop the run, it's going to open up play action. It's going to open up the passing game, and that's what Florida State took advantage of in the second half.
That's right. And Florida State, just for information's sake, rushed for about 30 yards total in the first half. Even though there were no sacks, there were several harassments, including the interception and also the near interception close to the goal line that Greg Brooks just dropped when they nearly sacked him close to the end zone. So after the game, when Kelly made the controversial statement, it's become controversial, that we're clearly not the team that I thought we were. He wasn't being critical of the players, saying, and he explained this later, physically I know what we got, but I expected more mentally, technically, technique-wise out of them because they were further advanced than, say, last year at this point. And he, he's been coaching a long time, and he felt like the preparations they made during fall camp were such that they were probably advanced, and he didn't expect those technical lapses. Agree or disagree?
I agree, but I understand to a certain extent. But let's get away from being so technical. Let's get away from being so tactical and all those things, all those key words, and let's go play football. Have an attitude. Defense is about having an attitude. Florida State made errors on defense Sunday night, but you know what? They look good making the errors. And what I mean by that is, even if they messed up, they still ran to the football. They still play with passion.
They were
still
aggressive.
played with a dog mentality. So even if you're not as tactical or if you're not as technical, if you play hard, you play with passion, a lot of times that's going to override your technique. That's going to override you being so tactical. That's going to override you maybe not hitting the right gap. That's going to override you maybe not taking on the lineman with the proper shoulder. And we're sitting here talking about all these adjustments. Should they need to run more man? They shouldn't have did this in the zone. They should have read this properly, did this properly. No, they need to play with the attitude. They need to play with their hair on fire. And they need to literally play for the man next to them and know that this is not about you. This is about the guys that you're on the field with, and this is about the guys who came before you. And as a player, you got to look yourself in the mirror and decide what you want.
Derry, can LSU make the adjustment and for the rest of the season and still make the college football playoffs potentially, which is their goal from the beginning?
I don't want to say they're going to make the playoffs. I think some things.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to predict that. What I'm asking is it possible to make this adjustment? Do they have the talent? Do they have the skill? Do they have the mental wherewithal to become more aggressive and play football like you're saying?
It's going to come from the coaches. Coaches have pride and ego. So when you say that's an adjustment, that means you kind of do some moving around. Are they willing to get rid of the Harold Perkins experiment, the inside linebacker? And what I want people to understand about Harold Perkins is this. It's not saying that they're going to completely eliminate him from playing the stack linebacker position. That's not what we're saying. What I'm saying is Harold Perkins cannot be a 3-down stack linebacker. There's no way. On third long, you need to line him up at the jack position, rush the passer. Even when he is at the stack linebacker position, maybe have him blitz up the middle, run some different stunts. I know he spied a couple of times against Florida State, but he was spying almost 7 yards deep, and he was giving cushion to Travis to make plays. Last year, when Harold Perkins was spying, Harold Perkins was literally on the line of scrimmage, meaning the space between him and the quarterback, the gap was already closed.
Right.
And so he just had to, once the quarterback left, he had too far to go. Sunday night, he had too far to go to make an impact on his spot position. So are you willing to use Harold Perkins like he did last year? Are you willing to put in the right secondary and make the right adjustments on defense to play a lot more man than you are zone? And if you're willing to do that, you have that talent to basically win a bunch of football games and put yourself in a position to make the playoffs.
All right, Derry. Well, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
You the man, Todd. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
People come from everywhere to Pawpaw's Campers and Cars.
Only Pawpaw's Campers and Shit is Pawpaw's Campers and Cars of people.
And we're going to let it go for I forgot.
Take the whole family over to Picayune. We got something for you. All right. What else we going to say?
PawpawsNicePrice.com.
That's probably all we need to say.
That was an interesting conversation with Derry Beckwith. Again, LSU is taking on Grambling for the first time ever this weekend. That kickoff is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium. And like I said, it's the first time LSU has ever played Grambling State. Long tradition, but not a good football team, or at least not as good of a football team as they traditionally are right now. So it should be a good opportunity for LSU to get some reps in for some players and maybe try some things out. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to listen to Jay Johnson's conversation, or at least 2 minutes or so of it, with MajorLeagueBaseball.com, MLB.com. This actually occurred last night. He's talking about the fact that Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz were going to face off today in the professional leagues, the minor leagues, but that was shelved at the last minute when the Pittsburgh Pirates decided to put Paul Skeens on the shelf for the rest of the season. Still an interesting conversation. There is about, 5 to 6 minutes more of it in full video. It'll be on TigerRag.com. So you can go check that out at tigerrag.com. But right now, without further ado, Jay Johnson on MLB.com last night.
Jay, thank you very much for the time. We wanted to have you on because tomorrow was supposed to be the day where Skeens and Cruz would face each other in the minors. But the Pittsburgh Pirates announcing yesterday that Paul Skeens, they've seen all they need to see, so they're shutting him down. What have been your early impressions of your former players and their first foray into pro ball?
Yeah, no surprise that they've had a ton of success. I mean, Paul is the best pitcher I've seen over one college baseball season in my 20-plus years of doing this. And you could really make an argument that Dylan had the best college career of any position player out there. So I knew it would be not a steep ramp for them, that they would transition well. They're both incredibly ready, for the professional game. And I think they'll be in the big leagues in short order, helping the Pirates and the Nationals in a big way.
Okay, so you can, again, go to tigerrag.com to watch that. It'll be on the homepage this afternoon. You can go and watch the entire interview that MLB.com did with Jay Johnson, LSU baseball coach, about Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz, and the great ambassadors that they are for the LSU brand and the LSU baseball program in general. Again, that's at tigerrag.com. And I want to thank Pawpaw's Campers and Cars, our sponsor, again, pawpawsrvs.com, 1-800-728-CAMP, 1-800-728-2276. Give them a call and get yourself an RV. Hey, it's better to have an RV and travel to Starkville, Mississippi, where the Tigers will be next week, than it is to stay in a hotel in Starkville. That's my experience and opinion anyway. So that about wraps it up. We are tomorrow going to be back with you. We'll talk more about Kim Mulkey's brand new contract extension that it's expected to be approved tomorrow by the LSU Board of Supervisors. Again, that's $32 million over a multitude of years. We'll have the full breakdown and analysis of that and the details once it is approved tomorrow, as expected by the LSU Board of Supervisors. And I guess that's it. I want to thank Jake McMahons for producing this, and we'll see you tomorrow.